Perfect. So I want to do this as practical as possible, so talking about the stuff that you guys are doing as well, not just the stuff that I like to say. So just quickly on who I am. So we're going to talk about running lean. This can be anything between 2 hours and 3 hours something, so depending on how long you want to do it. And yeah, just how long it would take for stuff. All this is going to be a bit of exercise and a bit of content, so I try to mix it. So personally, I've been doing this whole entrepreneurship stuff for like 6 years now. Started a company called Soup.io initially, which is like a multimedia blogging network similar to Tumblr. That worked well enough that I sold my stake at some point. Not well enough that I retired from that, but still felt like I was doing something right. Then started another company that didn't work out, and then started the current company together with Ash Moria, who wrote Running Lean, and we do a lot of stuff around lean startup, but also building our own products. And I'm more a product guy, so I'm a tech guy personally. So for me, the biggest question at the beginning is always, how do we start a company, right? And so this is, so the failed company that we started, we tried to do this part right, which is just do a financial plan, right? So you make like a nice spreadsheet in Google Spreadsheets or wherever you want to do it. And you of course have this beautiful graph which kind of shows you don't have enough money in the beginning and then you just go to millions. The biggest issue is this company, we had a beautiful graph, right? Failed after 1.5 years with 0 euros revenue and 100,000 euros investment, which is not too bad, as in I don't feel like we've wasted too much money. But still, 1.5 years is too long, and the plan, like, this thing never happened, right? We got stuck somewhere in the middle. And so for me, that's kind of the reason why I'm interested in this whole stuff, is basically figuring out faster, is this the right plan, right, or is this the wrong plan? How can we make it more agile, basically? So the current company we're running is called Spark 59. The product is called User Cycle. We basically do analytics, so it's similar to like Google Analytics or Kissmetrics, Mixpanel. We're profitable and proud, so we are making money. It's working. We don't have any investors, although we could easily raise money, but we don't want to. And I could tell you lots of stuff about that, but I don't care much to sell you the product right now. But the biggest thing for me was basically the difference between waterfall and agile, right? And waterfall and agile also apply to the customer, not just the product. So if you think of waterfall, usually you would, like, if you build a product, you accumulate risk, right? So you build, and your risk gets higher the more time you spend on not bringing stuff to the customer. And so for me, this is like the graph that really symbolizes how you work, right? So if you build your product, you start your company, and then you, like a year later, you release the product, that's not good, right? Because you accumulate a lot of risk in that time, because you a lot of unknown, basically. Versus if you do like lots of little steps where you say release, or you learn from customers, that just helps you keep the risk down. And so that's kind of the whole story of why Lean Startup and Running Lean is interesting. So basically it's about iterating product, and like Agile is about iterating product, we care about iterating the whole business model. So should we, yeah, maybe let's finish this one. So this is the typical graph, right? So everybody wants to have, like as before, the cash flow, this is like the users or the revenue or whatnot, right? So you kind of want to have, you probably have some flat growth in the beginning, but then you have your hockey stick that you want to reach. And the most interesting thing here is that you can separate these into two phases, which is figuring out the value you're delivering and how to accelerate the growth that you already have. And important point here is product market fit. So everybody gets stuck in the first part, right? So if you're in the second part, you're probably not sitting here. You already have a working company. You're like, yay, I'm making money. I'm like, I can't hire fast enough, and so on. And so the interesting part is not necessarily accelerating growth, but really figuring out what's the value to your customers that you're delivering. And so this idea of product market fit is basically what's the moment where you basically consistently deliver value to your customers and to the right customers. So you get customers coming into your, like, onto your website, and they want to buy your product, and your product is the right product they want to buy, versus something else. And maybe let's do a quick, so we're going to dive deep into business models and then also your business model. So maybe we just start with a quick introduction round for that. So maybe let's start on the left side. Do you want to just like quickly say who you are, why do you care about the whole lean startup stuff?
Hey, so I'm Richard. Hey everybody, and I care for the stuff a little bit from a different perspective, because I would like to help already small companies and medium-sized companies that already have some product to make it even better and use this technique of lean in order to implement it. Because usually
so implement existing companies.
Yes, because startups usually use it, and it's a great technique how to get results faster and make better decisions. So.
Okay, makes sense. Cool.
Hi, I'm Ferdinand Harmsen. I tried one company before which didn't work out, and now I'm trying a second one which has to do with helping people to be more creative by making use of their social networks. And I'm at the very beginning right now, already spending too much time on product development, but we started testing and trying the market and adjusting the idea.
Cool. Okay. Then you're exactly right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mika, and I'm caring about this topic because I'm working here. That's the one reason. And the other is that I'm also at really the beginning, and I'm planning to have a startup, and I'm just in the learning period. Yeah.
And just seeing the map basically of what stuff's happening.
Yeah.
I'm Ella. I'm actually in charge of a group education program, so that's why I'm here.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Similar, I guess.
Yeah, basically the same, and the whole spot is startup in itself as well, so we're trying.
Of course.
And looking to do it in the most effective way as possible.
Okay, hey, my name is Boris, and I've been together with Martin and the other guys in the open business for almost 2 years now, working for several clients outside of the Republic, and we are currently building a product. We are in the very early phases, although we already have clients, which is, I think, the whole development, and we're trying to do it very lean.
Does you work as an agency or you build your own products?
Both.
Both, okay.
We're trying to get experience and some money from the agency work, and then build the product on the experience we gained and the money that we have. So that's what we do.
And I guess you have a company.
My name is Brian. I am just very beginning of my idea, so I would like to know how to start. But this idea is not accomplished, so I don't know whether I will realize it.
But is it in the web area or like?
It is some combination between the game and the gambling.
Okay. Well, there's hopefully at least money there, so that's good. Cool.
I'm Gabriel. I'm trying to start a company. So for that I do also products. So that's why I need to understand this.
Cool.
Antišek, I'm trainer of IT technology, virtualization stuff.
Okay. So but like the
I'm
technology.
running my own company for 1.5 years.
Yep.
Previously I've been building for my employee, and now I'm running my own and quite fascinated by lean approach. So, yeah, looking forward.
Cool, sounds good. Okay, do you just want to quickly say who you are and just are you currently starting a company or are you just curious?
Yes, my name is Sylvia. I'm more curious and maybe I want to continue in the future.
Sure. You wanna...
Yeah, my name is Norbert. I have a company. We have a set of small web applications for owners of e-commerce, like e-shops and small businesses. And we do stuff like one of our application is an invoicing solution, and the other one is an application to create promotions on social networks like Facebook and Twitter.
Nice.
So we have like this set of tools, and we're also looking at like expanding and creating maybe expanding the functionality of current apps and So
but these are your own products.
Yeah.
Perfect. Cool.
Hello, my name is Jera. I have my own company also. It's iShop develops my own brand, and I'm selling Echo t-shirts.
You're selling
Echo t-shirts.
Echo t-shirts. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Cool. So, but you also have like a web shop, or is it all nice? Okay. Cool. Awesome. Perfect. I think we have everyone. So we'll basically try to make it a bit interactive. So if you guys have something to write, just for in 10 minutes or so, you'll need something to write on as well. Just like pen and paper. Or laptops will also work if you want. But then make sure you are on the Wi-Fi at least. Okay, so just for those who just joined just now, so just quickly basically saying we care about if we have this like hockey stick that growth that we're trying to achieve. The biggest issue we have is in the beginning is like getting stuck in that like first phase of delivering value to customers consistently versus like people coming to leaving the site after a certain amount of time or anything. So the first part we really care about is just like understanding our business model, right? So going away from, like for me as a tech person specifically, it's just thinking too much about product, thinking too much about building technology, not as much thinking about the whole business model. And so who of you knows the business model Canvas? Just like a show of hands. Perfect. Awesome. Like, you know, everybody knows it. Perfect.
Already workshop.
Yes, you had the workshop. So maybe now I'll go through that quicker. So we have the Lean Canvas, which is an adaptation of that. I'd still like to maybe quickly write those down. So the Canvas is basically just quickly documenting your business model. And so I just like take pen and paper and just write down like the basic customer problem, like the basic components for the company that you care about right now. So if you like the company that you want to basically build. So just as an example, I want to build a CRM software for business development. Okay, so just like I want to build like a customer relationship management system that helps business development people. And this is like the example that I'll use. But if you just write down basically who is your customer and so on. So on the canvas, and you can just write this down here, is like, so who is your customer, right? Like who is the customer you're targeting basically? And so if you maybe just basically write down quickly, briefly, like in basically the typical early customer, right? So it might be a company, it might be individuals, it might be students, it might be travelers, might be e-commerce businesses, and so on. And just try to make it as narrow as possible. So it should be a group that ideally identifies themselves as that, right? So like, for example, web hosting companies that offer PHP hosting versus companies. So just like make it a bit more narrow. And so with the CRM example, that would, for example, be business development people in bigger corporations. In Slovakia, for example, you could actually target those people. There's a list that you can create. Yeah, so just write down on a piece of paper, who do you think your customer is, basically. And we'll use this later on as well. So. And if you have multiple customer segments, then just choose one. So it might be like if you have a marketplace type model, then you might have different kinds of customers, but just basically try to choose one of those customers.
What about the situation when my customer is not my user?
Well, what's the specific example in your case?
Well, my users are not going to pay for any kind of the functionalities.
So it's similar like to advertising, for example, where you also have the user clicking and the advertiser paying.
Yeah.
I would just choose one. So in this case, I mean, usually
I'm going to choose my client, obviously.
Yeah.
Because he's going to pay for it. But,
yeah.
Just if I'm going to put the user somewhere in the process, or not.
Usually what I would do is you do both. So we'll just choose this with one, do the phone customer segment. Usually it's just like run the process with both, right? So you basically say like, who is my customer on the one side, who's the customer on the other side? Well, why are they doing it? Why are they doing it? And how does that like work together, basically?
So I would have two canvases, basically.
Yeah, for example, you have either two canvases or two colors on the canvas.
Fair enough.
But then again, this is just like a basic exercise to just like keep the stuff in mind. Okay, so this is the interesting and difficult part. Problem or job to be done or use case, right? So what are people trying to do, right? So like your customers, why do they care about your product? What do they try to accomplish, basically? So instead of saying what is the feature that you have, really say like what's the kind of benefit that they're getting, and why are they using it? And just again, this could be like a statement, like in the CRM case. In the CRM case, this might be, I want to get back in touch with people. I want to identify potential like people for partnerships. I want to organize my funnel of like incoming events. So these are like things I want to do, things that I have in my day-by-day, like work day, basically, that I want to get done. And you can also think about basically either it's a problem or like getting a job done, or it's often a fundamental human need, right? So like the reason why Facebook, for example, works is because it's about friendship and maybe about dating, networking, and so on. So there's like these fundamental social needs that you have, or you don't necessarily need to have like a job you're trying to do, but rather like just a need that you're trying to fulfill as a customer. So just write down basically an example basically, or multiple examples of why people would use your product. Okay. Everybody got something in there? Okay. So who of you already built a product? Maybe just like another quick show of hands. Like who of you has a product like working? Okay, so not most of it. So if you can think of an example again, like if you have multiple companies, for example, just thinking of the example you were thinking of before, what's like the minimum version of what you need to build, right? So like especially if you try to do something complicated. For example, a friend of mine did a fashion company where they actually had a factory producing the fashion pieces that people were uploading. So people would upload like a fashion sketch, and then they had a whole factory producing the sketches, right? And so that was their minimum version, right? In the end, it turned out to be too expensive, but that's the whole point, right? It's like think of what's the minimum versions you can do without like building a lot of stuff, basically. And just again, like try to write this down. This is a bit complicated to get right, but just basically, is it just software? And then if it's just software, what's like the main functionality that it needs to do? So just like, for example, in a CRM case, it would be, we do a simple online CRM, which like, simple is already a question there, that is tightly integrated into email and LinkedIn, right? So like just saying like, what's the feature set? And if I tell this to a developer, he might know, okay, this is about email, and it's about like doing some integration with LinkedIn. Then we want to have a get back in touch list, which is like the magic feature. So, difficult part again, channels. So how do you reach your customers, right? This changes over time, of course, right? So like in the beginning, you're not going to have the SEO expert on your team to optimize your site. You're not going to get organic traffic as much. You're not going to get like TV adverts or something because it's too expensive. So the question here is basically, how do you get your first customers? Do you have like a sales force, or do you need to call people? Or do you have like a Twitter account or like a blog where you basically write about the content? And people will come to your site based on that. Maybe just like go over these examples, right? So SEM is search engine marketing, so you would do like Google AdWords, for example. SEO would be you try to optimize your pages for Google to find it easier. Friend invites might be basically accelerating growth, so people go to your site and then they invite all their friends, and that's how it works. You could have social media, which is kind of like content marketing, basically. Sales, going to trade shows, calling people, actually doing, for example, open source you could also do in some cases. And yeah, of course, PR, which is not the best channel, but you could try. So just try to think of like one way to get customers. In the CRM example, it would be usually content marketing, so you would just like do a blog, how to be a successful business development person or salesperson, and just do content around that. Also doing partnerships, and probably also like trying to partner maybe with trade shows and something like that. And then affiliate marketing is also quite interesting. So just getting people, paying people a commission fee for coming to the site. So just try to think of how could people come to your product, basically. And just write down some examples. If there's any questions to that, just ask.
How much time would you say to spend on the canvas itself? Because usually everybody recommends like spend 20 minutes on it and go for it and try to.
Yeah. So we actually like we put into like the online link canvas version. We put like 20-minute challenge, like do it in 20 minutes. I think the point here is right to think about these things. Like I don't necessarily care about the canvas as much as I care about you having a good answer to it, right? So the whole point here is that you go from the perspective of building this amazing product to making a successful customer, basically. Like finding a customer you can make successful, basically. And so I think that's the whole point here is like, how do you find that person? Like, how do you get to them? So that's the challenge. And then what are you trying to do with them or for them? And who are they? And why are they paying for a product? Why are they paying for a product? It's just like to basically get you in that mindset, not necessarily to really, like, if you have completed the canvas, you have not necessarily achieved much. But if you have thought about these things, you have definitely achieved something.
What do you think about the approach? Because I've previously to the lean, running lean and to the lean startup, I've been reading Alexander Osterwalder's business model generation. And I guess what we've done wrong in Australia, because I was in a startup and they took me in to actually implement lean, because they were totally on the wrong road and tried to build. And the problem was that we couldn't really do it, and I think we tried to invent something new. Like we really hadn't seen all the models that were possible and haven't really looked for a model that works and tried to replicate it. Instead of, we tried to, we have this nice canvas, we'll put this there, and let's go and try it this way. What do you think, like trying it new, or?
I mean, I would argue the whole point here is not to follow the process like a religion. Like the whole point is not, you should not follow it one-to-one, right? Like that's not, nobody's gonna give you like a golden medal for that. And like Eric Ries is not gonna come to you and be like, you're a lean startup. Like that's not the point, right?
Yeah.
The point is, like you want to get to market traction faster, and you want to do it in whatever way possible. So the whole point is to find a process that works for you, right? So like that's the whole idea behind this. For example, I don't often do a lean canvas, but what I do often do is just write down who's the like, for example, if I mentoring like at the Pioneers Festival last year, for example, right? It's like just mentoring startups and like evaluating their pitch is like going through all these things. Like how do they get to their customers? Who are their customers? Do they know how to make money? Right? It's just like, it's, again, these simple characteristics that help you. It's just reframing, really. So it's like that's the only reason why I put it in here as well. It's like, I wouldn't say you need to do a canvas each 2 weeks. Like you could if you have fun doing it.
I was rather asking like finding something new or building the canvas for yourself versus trying to find somebody who already done something like that. Like in Lean Stack, you have the analogs and antilogs.
Sure.
And trying to build on a model that works rather than trying to find a model that you just created.
Yeah, I mean, everybody just creates the model, right? It's just a question of what's the background, right? So like, for example, like when we, like with the Lean Canvas, the background is, of course, Alex Osterwalder's like excellent PhD thesis and book, and without that, it would be much different, right? And so I think it's just always like, of course, if you use this, then you have already good basis.
Okay.
Like that's just how I think about it, but it's not, I don't see an issue with modifying it.
Okay, thanks.
Like we modified it, right? So, cool. And the last thing we really care about in a big way is revenue streams, right? So how do we make money? This is, of course, a difficult question in some cases, but just basically thinking of how much is the problem worth to the customer, right? So don't think about how much, like what's the price, what's the cost. Really just think about how much are you willing to pay, how much are they paying right now. There's an excellent book, Don't Just Roll the Dice by Neil Davidson. It's like a really short ebook, it's also free. So if you do care about pricing, don't just roll the dice. Look up the book. It's really nice and just gives you an overview of pricing tactics. So CRM example would be easy. We just charge $0.9 a month because other companies in the space charge similar things. So we kind of know that that's something that we can do. So just try to write down, like how many of you have a revenue model, basically. So for the company you're thinking of right now, how many of you have like a revenue model where you can say we charge money? Cool. Okay, so for the other ones, the difficulty is, I guess, knowing the customer, I guess, probably. We'll get to that later. So if you know your price, or if you have a rough idea, then write it down. And the whole point again here is this is easier live update. You can also do it online. You can do it on a big wall, and so on. So the whole reason why I wanted to talk about this stuff is because I basically care about customer development much more than about the canvas, right? So. Did you all go to the Lean workshop at like the spot opening, or just kind of trying to understand the background? Because you all knew the canvas, so I'm just trying to make sure it's not too much duplicate content. So how many of you like know about customer development and how it works? Awesome, perfect. Don't just know too much. Okay, so the whole point of customer development, right? So and why we do all this stuff is basically we want to focus on the right things, right? So the issue is we always do something and we always ignore something, right? And we kind of draw an inner like mental circle where we do like, we have the spots that we look at and all the black spots around it that we don't look at. And so the whole point of Lean Startup and customer development is to focus on the right things that you might ignore otherwise and just be less chaotic about it. So right now you're probably focused on the product, right? So you kind of look inwards into, like you're really focused and you know like this is where I want to go. But the issue of course is like who is your customer, how do you reach them, why do they care, right? So all these questions that are not inside but they're really outside, they're really fuzzy and really frustrating to think about because they're undefined to a certain extent. And so the whole point here is the customers are there, right? And we are kind of here looking inside, the customers are out there. So the whole point of customer development is to basically open up your mindset, right? So to go away from, I want to build this product, I know what I'm doing, to saying maybe, just let's verify it. Like, let's just make sure that we know who our customers are and we hear their own words. And we really go away from our current focus and try to find customers. And so instead of asking, will this business model work or will this company work, we really want to ask, who is the customer and why do they care? Right? That's the whole point of doing the exercise of who is the customer, what's the problem they're trying to solve, and so on. Because you do want to zoom away from your product. So one way to do that is actually just building stuff, right? If you build stuff fast enough and you just launch it, then you will see whether people care, right? Because you're going to launch it and people come to the site and they're not going to use it and you'll be like, great, I wasted hopefully 2 weeks, but if I wasted 2 years, then not so great, right? But that's one approach you can take, is just building a really minimum version and just making that fast enough. So that's actually something a lot of technology people like to do, right? You can still try to minimize it though, right? So you can still do something, for example, Idealab in Los Angeles did this back in '98, where they built, you could basically buy cars online. So we call it Cars Direct, and you'd have like a website where you could be like, this is the car you want to buy, and you could just like click buy and then deliver it to you. And that was, back then was a new model, now you can really do this. And the company worked great, but what they did not do in the beginning was do any kind of contracts or any kind of system, right? So they didn't build like a big backend system. What they did was basically, you would have like a get a price or like buy this car button, and this button would send an email to a team. That's all, right? Like they basically had a site which is just, here's a car that they knew they could buy from a dealer next door, right? And they would just basically, if someone clicks on that button, they would get an email, they would read the email, they would go to the dealer, buy the car, drive to the customer, done, right? And so they didn't really build anything apart from this like landing page. And so that like, I think like after they got like 50 cars or so bought, then they were like, okay, this is working, okay, check, now we can actually build the proper thing. And so this is a good example of how you could do it minimal, right? And it still seems like the same way to the customer. So that's called Wizard of Oz, right? So like you kind of have this, like you act as if it's working like a normal thing, but in fact it's just magic happening. Another example, a friend of mine from Yum, which is like a food delivery service in Austria, they do like, you basically go to the website, say I want to have pizza, and they like have a list of restaurants to deliver to you. So what he did is also, he did not do contracts in the beginning. So he did not go to the restaurants and say like, we want you to be on our site, let's do a contract, blah. Because the restaurant would be, why would I be on your site, right? Like, why would I care about your small site? Like, I know Netkellner is big, and I don't care about your new site. And so what he just did is basically do a fax gateway. So he would just send the orders to the restaurants without really ever doing any contract with them, but they already took orders via fax, right? So you just like send them, like with a fax machine, just send them a fax saying, this customer there and there would like to have pizza, please deliver it to him. And what he just did is like if there was an issue, people would call the phone, he would call the restaurant, he would kind of sort it out. He's still doing that for some restaurants. But then later on he added the contract. So again, trying to simplify, trying to bring it faster to the customer. The best and fastest method that I prefer, and that we're going to go into more detail with, is just talking with your customers, right? So going out to your customers, going to a company, actually having a conversation with them versus thinking you know what they want. And so if you think of like, I hope you can probably not read this, but if you think of basically going from your comfort zone, so you like have the inside the building comfort zone, which starts with the perfect product, right? So you build the most amazing perfect product, you kind of go away from your comfort zone towards like an MVP, and you go closer to like a prototype, which is really rough, and then you have the customer interview, right? And the reality is the other way around, right? So the reality, like get out of the building, reality is really, you start the customer interview, then you go to a prototype, then you go to an MVP, and in the end you have the perfect product. That's kind of the fight that you have, right? Because usually you love doing this, right? You love being in the building, in your comfort zone, and you hate being out of the building in the reality where like, is this business working? I'm not sure. Why am I doing this? I don't want to get up in the morning. This is frustrating. And so the whole point is kind of putting this into a context where you're still doing that. Where you say like each week we want to do 10 interviews, and that's how it works for me. So we can either do a break now if you want. Should we do a quick coffee break? Yeah. Okay. Then let's do like let's do like 10 minutes maybe. I think it's fine. Just like 10 minutes coffee break, and then we continue. Any questions?
How much?
No. Yeah. No, that's fine because I think it's very easy. So how are you doing for work?
Well, I did a few features because I did it check with let's say 10 people like you. Feedback on that. People were to see something I think were really important to add, and other people came after really to decide what we want to be for who. Because there can be so many things for so many people, and we live up to all the wishes that come up. At the end, you're nothing.
But that's what Canvas is all about as well. Like, who's the really ideal customer?
So those are the two major things. I think one thing was still needs some styling, but it's in.
Otherwise, we'll take it for ages. Okay. So now I want to do customer interviews. We'll need some volunteers later, but we'll manage this. So basically, if you care about customers and you care about customer interviews, then you should care about designers and user research. Like, they have been doing this for years, right? So if you hire a web designer even, they actually do a little bit of research as to who your customer is. The biggest issue is that they do that, but then it kind of gets lost because they make your nice website, but they never really tell you about all the research they did. The nice thing is, though, you can kind of choose a bit from their methods, right? And so if you look at user research, or like how you can work with customers, there's basically a couple of approaches. Either you can do a quantitative approach, so you do numbers, right? So you do like analytics stuff. You do a qualitative approach, so you actually talk with people face to face, or you do the approach that you also like do no data, right? So you just don't care. You just do stuff and then that's it. So you don't do any research. And so a friend of mine did this nice matrix where she was basically comparing different methods of talking with customers or like integrating customers into your process. And so she kind of separated these into quantitative and qualitative, and then generative and evaluative, right? So again, qualitative, numbers-based, qualitative, face-to-face kind of. Generative in the sense of it creates new stuff. It's not about evaluating your existing stuff that you're thinking about, but rather showing you stuff that the customer thinks about. And then evaluative is just evaluating your approach, your idea, your product. So if we do customer interviews, we really care about generating information and doing it in a qualitative way, right? So this is not about, when you start with a customer interview, it's not about testing your idea. It's rather figuring out what the customer thinks. And then the other thing you can do is a usability test where you actually like show your product, right? Or like a solution interview where you actually show your product and you're like, okay, would you buy this? And so this is a really important distinction because in the one part you really try to learn from the person, in the other part you try to test something. And that's like a really different mindset. So the whole point is we want to learn fast, so we could, of course, do a numbers-based thing, launch a landing page, build a product. It just takes much more time, right? So you need a bigger audience, people coming to the site. The good thing is if you do a qualitative approach, you can really get the quickest path to learn. And you usually get this from like 20 customers even, right? If you can find 20 people who would use your product, that if you talk with them face to face, you get a lot of information. Versus if you send them a survey or you do landing pages, like really, like it's not giving you a lot of information. I mean, you know this, right? If you have a conversation with somebody, there's so much input, like emotions and face expressions and what they're saying, what they're thinking, you can really understand that. And so, of course, if you kind of keep hearing the same thing, then you should stop doing interviews, right? So you should not do interviews for the fun of doing interviews, but really trying to see what their perspective is, and if you really get the same perspective over and over again, then you know you have at least one certain kind of customer. And of course, if you've launched and it doesn't work, then interview again. So the point here is what are you trying to learn, right? So it's not about just going out there and learning, but it is about, okay, I want to find, for example, I'm let's say I'm doing a program for agencies, right? And I'm doing like a time management program, for example, for them. Then I actually want to learn whether there is an agency that would pay for a time management program. So I'm going to ask questions like, what are the existing programs you're using? How do you cope with this and this, right? So I am going to probe into that. I'm still trying to learn from them, but it's not about, so what do you do for blogging? But if I'm doing time management, right? It's like you're still trying to set a context, basically. So planning your interview. So this is what you would do inside the building, right? And so we kind of had this before. Either solves a problem or gets a job done or fulfills a fundamental human need. So kind of try to understand this because this kind of influences your interview. Like what is the problem that people are trying to do? Why are people using your product? You can do a persona. So this is the one that the sheet that Lean Startup Machine uses. You can find this like if you just look for like persona and user research, then you can kind of find an approach of how you like you just document basically who is the customer, what are their pains, why are they doing something, what are their goals, and so on. And just kind of documenting that before you go out. And yeah, we're not going to do that now, but you can probably, like, you can just look it up and do it basically if you want to do interviews. So preparing an interview where you want to learn something, right? So what you can do is you basically do a topic map. So before you go out, you say, okay, so what are the big topics, right? So again, let's say I want to write a blogging tool, for example, right? I want to help build a tool that helps bloggers write more efficiently or do better stuff. Then I can kind of say, okay, for a blogger, there's like a topic of writing, so they care about like which headlines should they use and so on. For a blogger, there's also a topic of marketing, like what should I write and how should I publish it on social media. And then there's a topic like analytics, like do people read my stuff and how can I get more readers and so on. It's like kind of these rough topics that you can also address, right? So I can kind of ask you, so you have a blog, how do you solve marketing, right? So what do you do about marketing or what do you do about writing? Is writing difficult for you? There's kind of like these rough topics that you can use in an interview. And then the other nice thing you can do, this is something you actually do in the interview, is something called card sorting, where you basically, you have like these like statements of what's difficult for people, right? And you basically say, so what's the most difficult thing for you? What's the second most difficult thing? What's the third most difficult thing? And you have them basically put these, like, you give them like empty index cards where they just write down what they're doing like on a day-by-day basis, and then they would rank them by like what's most frustrating, right? So like what's like writing regularly, like as a blogger, it's really frustrating to write often. Coming up with headlines is also quite frustrating, but is it more frustrating than this one? It's just listing that and kind of getting their priorities, not influencing them in any way. The other thing you can do is a solution interview, or like basically a product or prototype test, where you either, and this is really important, you either test a prototype, so you actually get them to use a prototype, or you pitch them your product and get them to say, I would buy this, right? But what you don't do, and this is the most stupid thing to do, is pitching and getting feedback. It's like, here's my amazing product, what do you think? Right? It's like, you're not going to get anything useful from that. Either you ask them to commit to something, or you ask them to use your product, or the other thing, if you ask them how the world looks like, what are they doing, like listening basically. But pitching, getting feedback is what every startup does, and which doesn't help you because people say, it's so nice, I like you so much, it's an amazing product, keep doing it. And they would never buy it, they would never care. Right? And so this is the biggest issue that you can do if you do customer interviews, is pitching and getting feedback versus doing something that they need to commit to.
So that's pitching versus selling?
No, it's the same thing. If you sell and get feedback, it's the same issue.
Testing and selling, or testing or selling.
The big point here is you can sell. That's definitely a way of testing something, right? If I sell you something, but then I need to get you to commit to something. I need to get you to write me a letter saying I would buy this product. I need you. You could also test with like people giving you their email address, but it's just some people might do this quickly, right? So it's just you want to have something where, like the biggest issue that we had, for example, with one of our products was people like with the first one with Soup.io was people saying it's nice, right? And it's like it's a nice product, it's cool, I love it, it's super amazing, but they don't use it actively, right? It's like they would go to the site, they would even try the product, they would think, that's fun, but it wasn't actually fun, right? It wasn't actually interesting enough for them to keep coming back. And I think that's kind of the reason why you need some kind of commitment or some kind of actual test where they're like, it's not even, I go to the site, what do I do? Like, why am I here, right? You see their confusion, you see their, like they thought you would do something different or something. You want to have that information.
Can you simply scare these people if you ask for a letter of intent?
Say again?
Get you to scare them, because if you ask for a letter,
Yes, you can definitely scare them. And I think this is a question of when you ask it. Because usually what you would do is, so you would do like a problem interview where we'd like ask people for for their worldview, not for feedback, but really for what they're doing. And then you would do a follow-up, and then you would say, now we built this prototype here, right? This is how it looks like. Would you buy this? Right? So it's kind of like, it's a two-step thing. You usually would not start with, here's the thing, please sign here, but rather, we already had a conversation last week, now I can show you some more. What do you think? Is this interesting for you? But I mean, it did work for me, so it definitely works asking people, but you don't ask in the beginning, right? So you kind of describe the product, you show them the product, but then you, instead of saying, this is a great meeting, right? Like, you show them a product, they're like, that's nice. And then
I'm also wondering that I'm getting the feedback, but the problem is that they are not giving me the correct feedback, or they're saying, oh, that's really nice, please go on and continue. Whether I'm asking them correctly.
Yes.
So what if I do and rephrase the questions? What would you do? What are you missing? So on. I don't know.
Yes. We'll get to some of the questions later on. But maybe we can talk about this maybe later.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. So how do you find interview prospects, right? So everybody can do this. Depends on your product, though. Either you do just your extended networks, you just ask people on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. I'm building this new product, blah, blah, blah. You can definitely do a teaser page. So you just put up a landing page saying, we are going to build some kind of rough product, and then you say, can we ask you a couple of questions? And for example, with User Cycle, we did this. With User Cycle, we did a blog post saying, User Cycle, a better way to track and engage your customers. So it was already a bit of a test. And then the page would just be an email list, and then we would email the email list being like, okay, so you signed up for this list, do you have time for a Skype conversation? Then the Skype conversation, we would actually ask them, so why did you sign up, why do you care about analytics, what do you use right now? So kind of, you can use that quite well. So I need a volunteer, somebody, okay, perfect. I need somebody to just, or maybe you can keep sitting. So just as an example, basically how to do a bad interview, okay? So let me see. Do you do any kind of writing? Like do you do blog posts? Or? Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's pretend I'm a person selling you a blog post software or something, right? I want to, I'm building a product and I want to build it. So it's very good to meet you. So we do this great product where we basically help you write. So it's like you, instead of writing your blog post in like Microsoft Word or something, you can just like type it straight in the page and get people to review the draft that you have, and you can then like instantly publish it to all like blogging platforms like WordPress and Tumblr, and it's like all at the same time. So it's really fast. And so what do you think of that kind of approach? So if you have like a blogging, is this like interesting to you? Like, would it help you if you have like a product that? Sure. So one issue here, I'm talking too fast, and it's complex. So so I'm building a tool that helps you write. Okay, so it helps you share what you write with your friends, and they can give you feedback. Okay, and so. Issues I have to make a bad interview right now, so that's the different thing. Basically, okay. Let me. So, how do you write right now? So is it?
I write on Blogspot and on one sort of platform.
Okay, cool. So our product would basically help you. So if you have these two platforms, you could easily just write on one, and we would help you publish on both. So it's like it's really easy to do this at the same time, and you don't have to do as much work each day. And so I was wondering, like, do you care about this kind of tool? Like, if you had this kind of tool, what would you pay for this? Like, would it help you? Like how much would you pay for a tool that helps you like publish the two blogs at the same time? Okay. So it's really difficult actually to do a bad interview, but you do it usually, right? So it's point here is I showed you, I said this is the product, right? So like this is what we do, and everybody does this in the beginning, right? Everybody says like you start with this is what we document, like this is what our product does, and then you kind of show it maybe, and then you kind of ask for how much to pay. It's really bad because the issue is that I don't learn much from you, right? And I kind of have this tendency of asking. Like I'm a good listener, I'm not a good seller, so I'm not good at doing bad interviews, basically, in this sense. But the whole point here is we care about better interview techniques, right? So I care about how could I better listen to you, basically, instead of selling you what I'm doing. So the point here is I'm actually a researcher or a detective or a spy, right? So like that's kind of my job. My job is not to sell you something, but my job is to research why you're doing something right now. And so one thing you can do during the interview is just taking notes using index cards again. So you just like, you listen to the person and you just write down quickly their phrases and their words that they use. Usually what you would do is you'd have, so for example, if I'm interviewing you, then we would have somebody else take the notes, right? It's like I'm having a conversation with you, listening to you, and somebody else would basically write down notes and be like, okay, she said this was difficult for her, and so on. So usually you would kind of start with, are your customers, right? So this was also a question, okay, so do you like blog, where do you blog, and so on. Then kind of exploring their whole world, like what are they doing on a day-by-day basis, and then kind of closing and collecting contact information, right? So that, like, that's always kind of try to stay in that frame of, we said 30 minutes, like we sit down in a coffee shop for example, for 30 minutes, or do a Skype call for 30 minutes, really close, explicitly say, thank you for the interview, is it okay if we contact you again, thank you. And so everybody lies, that's the biggest issue, right? Because people want to help you. Right. So this is the big issue that you have with all this. Is like people are trying to be nice to you, and this is why you need techniques to kind of uncover the truth. So you're looking for emotions, frustration, excitement, things people care about. So one thing you should do, for example, with blogs, is I could ask you, when was the last time you wrote a blog post, right? And you could kind of say, 3 months ago. And then I would be like, okay, so this means you don't actually write frequently, right? So people, if I ask you, for example, how often do you write blog posts? Yeah, every couple of weeks, right? And this is a really different frequency. Like, if you write a blog post every 1 or 2 weeks, it's really different from writing it once every 3 months or 6 months. And so, if you ask about the past, people can't lie to you. If you ask about the potential future, like, of course I will do the exercise. Of course, every day I do yoga in the morning, right? But when was the last time you did yoga in the morning? Oh, last Thursday. So, really different. Also frequency and details, right? So imagine I want to do an app for nightclub owners or nightclub, like people who like to go to nightclubs. I could ask, okay, so when was the last time you went to a club? When was the last time before that? How much did you spend that night, right? Like, did you spend more than 50 euros that specific night? Can you remember that? Really going into detail of those experiences. And really asking why, right? So why do you care about blogging? Why do you want more traffic on your blog? Because it's kind of naive, right? So you have a certain idea of how the customer thinks, but you want to be intentionally naive and ask them why. And asking about existing solutions, right? So the big point here is, if somebody does not have an existing solution, it's actually a bad thing. So if, for example, a lot of software is actually Excel spreadsheets done right? So a lot of software you could do with an Excel sheet, and the point is software just helps you do it a little bit better. But if people started trying to do it with Excel, that's actually a good thing, because it kind of shows you they care about it, right? Other example would be, I do a mobile app for diet, right? Like I help people like eat the right things at the right time. If they have not made a plan for their diet yet, then they're not gonna be a good customer, right? So if they don't care enough to actually try it right now on pen and paper, then if I do the best mobile app, they will still not use it consistently. Probably. Okay, good thing here is something called the mom test. And a friend of mine is actually writing a book on this called the mom test, where he basically, the idea is, if you ask your parents, could they lie to you, right? So if you ask your parents, like I had this as an example before, if you ask your parents, you like this, is it good? They say yes, right? They're like, of course, I love what you're doing, keep it up, keep up the good work, right? They're really encouraging. And so if you do a good interview, your parents could not lie to you. Right? If I ask them, would you use my product? Would you, like if I ask my mother, I made this wonderful website, would you use it? And she'll be, of course, I would try it. Yes, I would go there. If I ask her, when was the last time you went to this kind of website? She was like, what website? I don't know. I don't actually use the internet frequently, right? So it's like the whole point here is people can lie to you and you want to avoid that. So, and asking about money is really important. So let me do the good interview. So can I ask you again, but in the listening part? Okay, so we already talked about blogging, right? So you said you had 2 different kind of blogs you were publishing. Are you publishing the same kind of things in these blogs? Okay, so what kind of blogs are they?
One is in Slovak language, the other one is in English, and the one is that is in Slovak is more about like volunteering and traveling.
Okay.
and the one in English is more about my personal opinion.
Okay. And for the one about traveling, so do you have like lots of readers, or how does it work?
No, it's on the platform of SME, which is Slovak newspapers.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The readers that go there,
Yeah.
I don't have like my own audience, and if they just like the title, they will read the whole blog.
Makes sense. And so how do you write your posts right now? Do you just write them in Word, or?
Yes,
Okay.
in Word, and then I just copy paste it.
And you have to like write them regularly, I guess, like every week, or?
No, just when I have a topic.
Okay.
The
So
last
when was the last time you wrote?
The last time I wrote was, I think, 2 days ago.
Okay.
Because I had a topic. It was for the Slovak one, and the last time for the English one was maybe 1 month ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And how long does it take you usually, like to write such a post? So, like the last one, you like 2 days ago. How long did you write that one?
Maybe 20 minutes.
It took you 20 minutes to write the post.
Yes.
Not bad. So if I was doing a product that would help people write blog posts faster, you would not be a good customer because you're already too fast. Like if I write a blog post, it takes hours. Yeah. And did you get like friends to review the post, or was it just, or like colleagues
yes,
maybe?
Because every time I post something, then I post it also on my Facebook status.
Ah, yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Do you look at the analytics? Like, do you look at how many people click through or like read the posts? Do you care about that?
There is something like a readership, so I see how many people read it. It's not a lot, like it's usually about 500.
Okay.
And the most I had was maybe like 3,000.
For one single post?
For one single post, but it was like when they had it in the special section because more and more people were reading it. So.
Yeah. Have you tried any other techniques for like making it more like marketing your posts? Like, or used any tools maybe?
No, it doesn't have.
Cool. Okay, so good example, right? So I kind of know which tools she's using, and I know that she like writes blog posts fast. So I kind of get an understanding of what her existing world looks like. So if I was writing a tool which would help her, for example, I don't know, share it with all her friends more quickly, then the question really is like, why didn't she already try the existing tools, right? Because there's so many out there that would help you like publish it to 5 platforms at once and like do nice Twitter buffering or so. I didn't ask for social media though, so if you have a Twitter account or not, but you mentioned Facebook. But yeah, so I would basically probe into that, and somebody else would take the notes, right, and kind of try to uncover the emotions, right. So the only interesting thing here was probably the views, that you cared about the page views, right. So like that's a good thing. So I could basically, if I do something in analytics that might be interesting to kind of say, okay, how can you, using that as a language, how can you increase your readership for a blog post or something. But yeah, and then often you could just like also ask the price, right? Like just you use an existing tool. So how much did you pay for Microsoft Word? It's like too broad probably, but how much did you pay for this time tracking software, or how much did you pay for like, or how much did you pay your developer, right? So imagine a company that has like a system administrator and you sell the best cloud computing technology, and you say like, okay, so how much do you pay a sysadmin, and do you really want to hire another one, or do you want to use our tool, which is like $100 a month? So it's like you can kind of try to use also like people in the company as anchors for the pricing.
Can I ask a question in terms of the problem validation? Because now you have the hypothesis that it probably takes her longer to write the post because she has multiple platforms and so on. Would you try to find other problems? Because that's my question. Like, would you go and only try to validate whether the hypothesis was right or wrong, or would you try to find other problems that she maybe has with blogging?
Yeah, I would probably do both. So I would kind of have like a main idea of what I think I want to learn, right? Mm-hmm. But then you want to listen to anything else that kind of stands out. Okay. So what you're really looking for is signal, right? So you're basically looking for something where people say, here I've actually did something, built something, created my own system to solve this problem because it's already spent so much time on it. Mm-hmm. So you want to do a bit of surfacing around these things, right? Mm-hmm. But then again, the question is, do you really want to pivot towards that direction? Okay. So you really want to, like I think usually I do have an idea of what I want to learn, but then again, if the person says something and that I think it's interesting, I write it down. Mm-hmm. And then I can kind of come back to it and be like, okay, wait, 5 people said they care about analytics, but we want to help with writing. Maybe we should help with analytics, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, it seems a consistent pattern they care about. And then you might run another interview with those people, actually diving deeper into that. Okay. Okay, to summarize that just quickly, and then we'll do a quick group exercise on interviews. So the whole point is you can start creating a topic map. Then you want to figure out who the person is you're interviewing. You can do allow it to go off track a bit, right? So like the point is not to just do it straight, like here's my 5 questions, but rather probing into the person listening. So it's not like a survey, it's really listening to the person. Although you might have some questions prepared. And then you do want to take notes and you do want to respect your time and take email address. What you don't want to do is asking everybody, right? So we'll actually do this for the exercise now because we have people here. But usually not everybody's your customer, right? So if I do a tool for companies, then of course it's a really narrow segment usually. Don't interview mentors, investors, or your friends, right? So the worst thing is you go to like a startup event or like a startup challenge and you think your investors or the mentors there are customers. And you ask your mentors, so what would you build in this product, right? And your mentors say, of course, I would totally build this feature. Right? They have no, I mean, they might not be the customer, right? If they're the customer, then that might be a valid point, but still it's a bit dangerous to think, oh, because they're the expert, they know. Right? There's still one data point.
Why not with friends?
Your friends? Well, it depends, right? It depends on who they are, right? So the whole point is you don't want to ask the people who are most available, you want to ask the people who are ideal, although you can kind of go your way towards that, but the point is not just that, right? So not just ask your friends, what do you think about my business, and so on, but really try to find the actual people who would use or care about it.
And you will tell us later how to find those people?
Well, I kind of already skipped on it. Now, so usually you would, I mean, in your network, if you think, maybe it's your friends, right? In your friends, there is probably a couple of people that really care about the topic that you care about, right? And so these people, of course, right? What I'm saying is don't ask everyone. Right? Don't like ask everyone to get some feedback. Really try to ask those who have some kind of experience. That's the whole point. Like you wanna have the experts in the field in your specific product, like who care about your product, not people who think like who do startups, for example. Yeah, don't explain how amazing your idea is, and don't send out a survey. I think that's the worst thing you can do is sending out a survey for customer development. A lot of people do this, but the issue is it's just very narrow-minded. It's very like, here's one question, here's one question, here's one question, here's how I think you should think. Right? It's like, you very much give.
Can you ask like the problem I have with the plans pushed together is for like 99.something% of the users will not be based in Slovakia, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not able to really like sit down with them.
But you can do Skype, right? If you do Skype, that also works. It's not as good, but it's like doing a Skype session. Like for example, we actually like 1 month ago I did like lots of customer interviews for 2 weeks, and we just did all of them via Skype.
Okay.
So, but how do you Skype somebody you don't know, so he's not in your friends?
Yeah. I know. But the interesting thing is that actually works to a certain extent. Like you could actually, like we, for example, just ask people on Twitter, like we're going to build this new product, right? So what I was doing this with a friend of mine who was building something in the email space, and he would just like, he wrote a tweet. He has like 1,000 followers, so that helps. But then again, you could probably try to get the word out, right? Even if you have your circle of friends and there's somebody in there who cares about that, or maybe like a startup group on Facebook or something. And we just write, so we're thinking of this new product. Does anybody have like time for a quick Skype conversation? Right?
So you're leveraging the friends' networks?
Yes. Of course, you use your existing networks, but then you try to zoom more in, right? So if you get, for example, one thing that works really well is you find one person and then ask that person, so who else do you know who has that problem, right? Who else do you know who cares about this? And then you can really connect your way, basically. And so, for example, in this case, like we had somebody who answered a tweet with his like Skype panel, and then we got into a Skype conversation the same day. And he was based in London, and then he introduced us to a friend of his from Berlin, and that friend introduced us to another friend of his in Berlin as well. And then we met with that person, like actually sitting down for a coffee. But with all of them, we had a Skype conversation. And it's just like you can basically you build your network over time, right? So
I can imagine that friends can do a favor to me that they give me their friends.
I know what you're saying.
Now kind of I'm extending this network.
Yes.
So the people I'm going to ask is actually not my friend.
Yeah.
But I'm asking him to give me 30 minutes, 40 minutes
yes.
of your time.
Yes.
Which is very valuable. You might have family,
yes.
you're running fast.
This is, yeah, exactly.
Is it working?
That works if you frame it in a way if people care, right? So if I say I can fix your email, right? So if you have like an email inbox of too many emails and I can help you make it better, right? Let's have a conversation about that, right? And people who have a problem with email, they will, if they are not super busy, right? Of course, people who are super busy will have an issue still. But because some people just say, I don't do Skype calls, right? I don't do any kind of calls. But people who do care, who have that problem, or who do think maybe I've tried 5 tools but none of them work, they think it's interesting. Right? Like that's what I've usually seen is like people actually think it's interesting and they like being interviewed, they like being shown something. But it depends, right? It's like the question, of course, is again, if you're in a really corporate environment, for example, then it's usually warm introductions, right? If you're selling something to a big enterprise, then you just need somebody who introduces you. Which has worked for me as well, but it's just you need that one connector. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's do a quick group exercise on interviews, just so you also do some interviews. So I am choosing an example here because probably not all of you have customers in the room and we can kind of compare the results. So imagine we want to build a mobile app who helps people find restaurants for lunch, right? So let's say it's lunchtime, we want to go out and find a good restaurant in Bratislava for lunch, right? With my group of coworkers, right? And so I want to build this app and I kind of want to figure out whether it's a good idea to build this, right? So I want to do an interview for them. And so maybe just quickly, so we need basically half should be interviewers and half should be interviewees. So maybe just find the person next to you and figure out whether you want to interview or not. Maybe just like in pairs of 2. So just try to do that now. Okay, so we do 5 minutes or maybe 4 minutes something. And you basically interview, like one person interviews the other and tries to find out which kind of customer are they, right? So we're trying to build an app. That helps people find restaurants for lunch, right? So you want to figure out what kind of person this person is, right? So are they working 9 to 5 in an office with other people? Are they working from home? Are they studying maybe? Like how do they work, right? Because you kind of care about this group of people going for lunch. And then you care about, do they actually go out for lunch, or do they maybe have like catering or something? And then, or like, do they bring something from home? And then where do they find out where to go, right? So like, do they have like friends recommending it, or do they use like Yelp or Fiverr or Truecaller, or do they use Google or Twitter or who knows, right? So how do they figure out where to go for lunch, and how could you kind of help them do that? But you're not trying to sell, you're really trying to learn how they do it right now. Okay? And yeah, okay. So let's just try this. Like one person interviews, the other one responds and says how it's going. Quickly, can somebody tell me an example, like what you learned from the person? Just like here we had an example, like they don't go, like he doesn't go out at all, so it doesn't, like it's the wrong customer. It doesn't go to restaurants. Freelancer at home. Yeah, freelancer at home, exactly. So maybe just some examples of, like from the interviewers, right? So not from the customers, but from the interviewers, what you learned from them.
We have a smaller city where the company is based, therefore there are only a few locations where they can go to, so they already know all the locations and basically only look up whatever they want. But on the other hand,
so they kind of have the list already and they don't never need to like go online or something, or
yes, and they are usually when there are ads or something like that, that something new is in town, they're using it. But on the other hand, there's potential for when they are outside of the city, in some other city, for example in Bratislava, to use some kind of an app that will give them recommendations.
Okay, but did they already use any app, like
basically
or go online?
Google and recommendations, so not really.
Okay, cool. But they did say Google, or he did say Google.
Yeah.
Okay. Another example.
So Martin's basically working 9 to 5 most of the times. Does go out 4 to 5 times a week for lunch. And he actually is using an app. Check it out.
Interesting. Good job.
It's called Restaurants.
Okay. But it's like it has local restaurants in Brussels.
It's a local app. Nice. The problem is though that the app doesn't have enough of the restaurants signed in, so only like 10 to 15% of them actually reveal their daily menus. Although we know that they have the menus available. Right?
Interesting, but so he does care about the daily menus.
Yes.
Like for him, daily menus is the reason why he chooses which restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, he does have his favorites, top 3 favorites. But then again, he chooses from the portfolio of menus that they have.
Okay. Excellent. Cool. Okay, so let's do a quick one the other way around. So you just switch roles basically. Let's do this for just 2 minutes. So just quickly figure out the same thing the other way around. So one or two more learnings from the other persons. So, anybody want to volunteer and share what they learned?
I found that he's interested in something like application, but through website, not app like installing app, but checking every time on regular desktop.
But how did you ask you about that?
How I asked if generally is approaching things like, okay, I'm looking for example, car reviews, and I'm going also to install some kind of application or something like that.
Okay.
Just checking if he's so hot for new sources of information. No, the answer was not. So I just looked for some other way how to maybe find some interesting way for him to get information from website, maybe some newsletter, some special prizes for some kind of menus through newsletter or something.
So did you learn? Is he working from home, or what's his?
I just checked that if he's going for lunch every day. Yeah, answer was yes, positive. So but not other information. I just went through all of those things. If he's going for apps generally, that was my direction. Not surroundings like work.
It's a valid thing to do.
Yeah.
So you're learning something different, right?
Yeah, from his behavior generally, and to find the direction. From my point of view, as efficient as possible.
Sure, if you want to figure out which technology should we use.
Is it for those types like apps installing in Android, and then I'm asking.
Makes sense. Cool. No, I think it's a fair point to make. I would probably ask both things. But
I tried the most efficient way. So.
That's good. Cool. Any other people who want to volunteer? Yep.
Mirka is working here in center. She spends whole day here in work. She goes every day for lunch out, and maybe once or twice per week for dinner. She didn't use any application or internet to find out how to find a restaurant with some kind of food, but she would appreciate some application that will show her restaurants with menus and locations.
So did she Google, for example? So did she go to Google to search for something, or
no?
She probably asked friends. I would think.
She knows this environment, and she doesn't Google.
No, makes sense. Cool. How many people got somebody who does go online or who uses an app or something, like as an interviewer? So who of the interviewers found a good prospect basically who does use the internet? Or so we had somebody here, I think.
Yeah, using internet but not apps.
But not apps, yeah. Okay. You have, okay. So I think probably
most of them maybe
so maybe 1/3 or something of them. That's good. Yeah. So this because these will be the early adopters, right? So if you're looking at who are the first customers that you could target, you really want to have the ones who are already looking on Google, for example. You could maybe either put an ad there, or at least kind of be sure that they're in the right frame of mind. So it's much easier to target those. But you could also try just word of mouth, right? So if people like hearing it from their friends, and you have an app that actually shows daily menus, then.
But maybe if they are Googling, they are not so far from using app, because every time those environments got okay, you are an online version, but there is some click and go for install, and that is not so far.
Yeah, and you could as well do both, right? So if you have, because one issue here is of course the data, right? So the other thing that you probably want to do is do custom development with the restaurants and figure out how to get the stuff from them, like the daily menus, in an easy way. Can you get a newsletter where they send you a PDF each day or something?
So maybe you can group them or identify group which is maybe Googling, which is maybe more far, installing every time application.
For example,
or other things.
Yeah. And what I probably do in this case is zooming in on those people who already we know are using technology to find stuff, and then he's already using an app, but it's frustrating. What else do we have? Kind of zooming in. Cool. So that's really all on customer interviews. I don't know if we actually need a break. Do you guys feel yeah, we can probably go continue. Are there any more questions?
Yeah. So what did you say? How many of these interviews will you do?
So I would basically, I think the more important thing is doing them in a short time frame. So it's about, for example, let's say you want to like launch a new product, then you would say next week I want to do 5 interviews, right? And so, but in total, usually it's like 20 interviews maximum. But it's
Sorry for the following question.
Of course.
But what is the kind of the statistical relevance of this?
It's a very good point. It's not about statistical significance. This is not about doing proper research or doing a study. It's just about finding a better signal, right? So it's like of course you could also do proper market research, but it's just too expensive, right? So what you want to do is you want to find a group of people who care about your product and who you could also show like an early prototype to, and who you know are the right customers, basically. So this is, it's just like, it's a very qualitative way of figuring it out, but it just helps you basically get started. So the point is not to basically say I've validated, like it's not to say I've validated, I have a customer check, but it's rather to say how I have 20 people who would be the right customers for me. Now I can build a quick prototype and show it to them and see how they use it.
What are your experiences with para or multiple, or to offer this or do a survey to multiple of those on one event, for example? Is that also possible way
like
to evaluate with, like here, with multiple of those guys on something like workshop and receive some feedback immediately in audience?
Like having a focus group, basically.
Yeah, something like I will invite for workshop for free, just go to the place, I will show you something, you can also test it or something like that, and they will just give you feedback. Maybe also more efficient. I'm looking for efficiency.
I know what you're saying, yeah.
But I don't know if it is exactly the same if I'm doing face-to-face with one.
I think it's
multiple of them on event.
Yeah, I think it's quite different. I mean, to be honest, I haven't done much of like interviewing a group just because it's much more mental effort, right? It's like listening to a group is quite difficult. And getting them to talk, right?
That's a fact.
The good thing is if we talk to each other, then I can listen to you, and you feel like you need to talk. It's really only.
I just wanted to ask about this experience.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I have done some of that for like showing the product, right? So if it's about like doing like solution type.
And maybe after that it has to one-to-one, face-to-face, maybe discussion, maybe something like that. But
I would try the other way around. So you basically you try to find the right people using one-on-one conversations, just like a small group, right? And kind of with them, okay, you know the small group exists, and then you say, okay, we show the product, we might show it to a bigger group at the same time.
If I just may add, I think you're risking herd behavior here. You're risking that the opinions that your potential customers might have will just spread around and they will get you the same answer, although they wouldn't do it if you just do one-to-one.
Yeah, I'm just asking.
So yeah.
That's a very good point. Because people are like, somebody else is doing this thing. So somebody else is crossing the street, although the craft light is red, so I might as well do the same thing.
So once again, you do these, interviews to rather test your product or to test the market as such, or to test the market.
It's basically to test the market, or to. It's also part of the product, right? Because it's a question of what you emphasize in the product, right? So, for example, this helps you, like, if you write the landing page, right, and the customer says, like, for example, on the lunch thing, like, they care about daily menus, right? And if every one of the customers cares about daily menus, then and for some reason I would have ignored that. Maybe I'm an expert already, so I kind of know this. But let's just say I might have ignored this aspect. Then I learned, okay, daily menu is really important. I will put it big. Maybe I didn't call the app like that. Call the app daily menus and just do that as the main thing. Not make it a restaurant find, but really say we offer daily menus for each of the restaurants you want to go to. So it's just like that's what it's about, right? It's kind of framing your product in the right way. And finding the right market, of course. Like it's kind of looking for the market, and then from that market figuring out which product is right, or which feature is right. But yeah, so we usually, so for example, with User Cycle, we did this like 1.5 years ago. It's just working, for example, with marketing persons and realizing marketers are nice, but they're not the right customers. So we actually changed the customer segment, even though they liked the product, but we kind of knew that they would be frustrated customers for us. Any other questions to customer interviews? Like, there's lots of stuff on customer interviews also. Like, if you just Google customer development or customer interviews, there's lots of content.
What about, for example, extreme users? it would be only users but not customers because they already either have some kind of solution figured out. Are they? I don't know. That's kind of a question we've been trying to look into.
But again, how do you mean extreme users?
Those are usually people that are
like power users, basically.
Yeah, power users. Somebody who deals with the problem on a different frequency or intensity.
I mean, so the good thing is, like, those are often your early adopters, right? The early adopters that you get in the beginning are often the people who care a lot about this, right? They try a lot of different tools, and this is a different group of people that you get later on. But so these are the people who also share a lot of the information, right? So they talk a lot with their friends, and they know a lot of other friends who care about these kind of tools. So usually that's a good thing.
Very similar. Okay.
Yeah, so like because they care, right? So the biggest issue you have in the beginning with the early customers is that they don't care. Like they look at your website and they're like, this looks interesting, and then they leave, or this looks interesting but they think it's something else, right? And then they sign up and then they realize your product does something else completely than what they thought. And so it's basically like for that it works the same way with power users. Like if they're power users, you might even have a better interview because you already know, like they already spend so much time thinking about this that they already know a lot of the language.
Okay.
I found it's quite crucial part to find power users or some kind of very active users in my area or in my let's say solutions and this stuff. Exactly, I'm looking for those types of guys to spread the right people to spread my idea in the right way. They understand and they spread it in that right way. That's what I'm looking for quite a long time. A few months later, I started to identify this to spread through those evangelizers or like
Steve Blank has the term of the early evangelists, right? It's not the early adopters, but the early evangelists who really like they want to evangelize your product. They're like writing blog posts and like telling all their friends because they love the app so much.
And
they're perfect.
Also promoting your activities, like doing. You can see feedback. That's something I'm missing a lot from my. Because I'm a trainer, for my students, they are not giving feedback, any. And I'm still trying to, with my blogspot, with my another WordPress blog, and a lot of activities, workshop promoting, no feedback at all. So they are admins, IT admins, they are doing the stuff, but I just need some evangelizers, so some spreaders, something like that. And I found.
I think it's very important.
How do you find them? What did you say? How do you find them?
So again, the customer interviews kind of help you a bit with that, right? Because they try to uncover people who they have a lot of emotion, they have a lot of they use a lot of existing tools. They kind of so that's part of this is also finding the right people, right? So if I ask somebody who is like a bit interested in this, but he says, I have this friend of mine who he uses like try 5 tools and he recommended me this, then you might want to interview that friend and that person might then become your evangelist. So it's kind of you try to find that network basically. And the good thing is that these people like to talk, right? Like they like to, they also care about your company, right? They're not buying your product, they're buying your whole vision of the company. They want to be with you on the journey sometimes.
There are just few of them, really few of them, really few of them. But they are very, very valuable then. Very valuable.
Cool. Okay, so no break. I have I guess probably half an hour or something, or maybe 20 minutes. So maybe just let's just summarize this again. So after you did these interviews, right, you want to look at the notes, right? So you actually want to sit down as a company, and you have one important thing also, if you have the founders of the company, it's a difference if the founders go to interviews or if somebody else does the interviews, right? If I hire an intern to do the interviews and the intern comes back and shows the results, then the people who actually make the decisions didn't hear it themselves. Right? And so that's a big issue. If they actually did not hear it themselves, they might not believe it. They are like, oh, you did this interview wrong, right? We know it so much better. So it's really important that people making the decisions do at least some of the interviews, so they kind of see how the customers really think. And then you kind of want to basically analyze those and identify what to do next, of course.
Maybe what you just said is not only for the founders, but especially when it's about apps and software development, can also be very true for the developers.
Yeah.
I've seen several
Yes.
situations where they really had to come along to the user testing to believe that people didn't know how to use it.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I think one interesting example is Meetup.com. So what Meetup.com does is each Thursday they basically do usability sessions. So each Thursday, I think 3 or 4 customers come into the Meetup.com office in New York, and they actually sit down physically in the office and do like usability test with the current version of the product or with the next version. And that test is like done by like 2 or 3 people, but every engineer in the building gets this live streamed on a second monitor. So like each Thursday you actually see a user using the product, right? And you see them. You have to. I'm not sure if you actually have to see it, but at least you can tune into this, right? And you can kind of see people getting stuck and like asking questions and whatnot. And you see this every week, right? And for them, this has been really important, just like optimizing the usability of their site. It's just like getting every engineer to see this every week, even though they don't do the interview, but they still get that. So I totally agree. Like, makes a big difference. Cool. So that's almost all. So let's imagine you already launched, or you might have already launched. So what can you do then, right? It's like the whole lean startup stuff kind of changes around that. Like in the beginning, it's really about the quality, figuring out who your customer is, how you work with them. Later on, it's really about correction. So later on, it's really about building the right features, right? So the whole point is you have launched and you have maybe too many features already, but the question is now, or like parts of your product, or maybe you have 5 products instead of 1. So the question really is, what's the right thing to do next, right? And that becomes the biggest issue. Is like, okay, you can do a long roadmap and you can plan like your year for the next 6 months, or maybe year. But then the issue is that you actually are quite slow because of that. And so, one interesting concept. So, how many of you have seen this before, like the R metrics? Okay, very good. So I'm just going to touch briefly on this. So I think in May or so, there's a workshop on metrics, which goes into this proper. But just quickly, because it's a nice model. So Dave McClure, a prolific angel investor from the Valley, kind of made this idea of like how does the customer lifecycle look like, right? So if customers come to your site and they interact with your website, what are the important parts, right? And so in the first part, and these are also like functionalities of your product, right? So like there's a part of your product that like is shown when people come to the site, and then there's a part where like people pay for a product or like a feature that they pay for. And so he kind of says acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. Kind of saying these are the big 5 areas that you have in a product that you can measure and that you can optimize. And so he kind of starts with acquisition, saying acquisition is like how do users find you, right? So how do users come to your site and how do they sign up, right? Like how does that flow work? Do they get a call and you call, or you call them basically saying, please buy this product, and then they send you an email, and then they sign a contract, and then they go to the site and use the product, or how does it work? Activation, do people actually have a good first experience, right? So do people, they come to the site, they signed up, they are looking for the value, they are looking for your product, but it's not that what they want. It's not what they thought they were going to get, or they don't understand. They like send you a support email, hopefully. Most of them leave. Retention, do users come back, right? So like if people have a first good experience, do people actually come back later on when they could have a reason to come back? For example, in the lunch example, if you have this mobile app for lunch finding, if people use it once, but then they kind of know the restaurant and they don't use it again, then it's kind of useless, right? Revenue, of course, how do you make money, right? And how does that model work? And then referral is usually for word of mouth or virality. So how do you, like, do people actually tell others? Do they invite their friends? And sometimes you can measure that, sometimes you can't. So the biggest challenge, like after launch, is basically this, right? So ideally you got some revenue, you might not, but ideally you have some revenue or at least some users, and you kind of here right now and you want to go there. And what's the process of going from $2,000 a month to $10,000 a month, which might be the difference between needing funding or being profitable. And so just quickly touching on this. So how you would usually do this, and we can talk about it later in detail if you want. You have numbers, right? So the whole point is this number, like the $2,000 a month, is made up of individual people, right? And so you care about these unit economics. You care about each day we make $70 because 2 people paid for a subscription. And so why do 2 people pay for a subscription? Because of the people who stayed, 25% of them actually paid for the product. And then, so you can kind of like calculate it down from, like let's do the other way around. If 10,000 people come to the site each day, 600 of them sign up, 50 activate, meaning they use the product successfully, 10 of them are retained after weeks, come back, and then 2 of them actually pay for the product. And so these are numbers that you can actually optimize and then you can think, okay, what are the features that are the reasons for these numbers? And so what you would usually do is you could kind of compare these two, right? So you kind of say, what do we have right now? Where do we need to be? And what are the two numbers which are the biggest issue here that we can try to improve? Right? So that's the usual way how we go after launching something, is really trying to optimize these numbers towards the point where they work, or realizing we can't optimize them and then maybe zooming out and trying a different product.
I didn't get the, sorry, can you go back?
Sure.
I didn't get these numbers. So 5% of this unique sign up.
Yeah, it's a bit complex. I mean, I can go into detail a bit if you want. Like this, I mean, it's a bit too metrics focused. That's why I didn't want to zoom into it too much. So in this case, let's say you have each day, okay? Each day you have 12,500 people coming to your site, right? And so let's imagine right now it's happening, and in June 2013, so like in 3 months, the same thing is still happening, right? So let's, for example, say we don't actually do more marketing, right? We just improve our product, right? So we just make our product better. And so we kind of have the same numbers, and then we know the current numbers, right? So if you measure your funnel right now, if you measure like what's happening, you can say, okay, out of these people who look at the site, unique users, they actually, 5% of them sign up, right? So 5% of them actually say, this product is interesting, I want to sign up for it. Out of these 5%, another 8% actually say, this product works for me, right? So they actually use the product. For example, project management application, they create a project, they track something in there. And then out of those, another, like you basically consistently lose people, right? So the biggest issue is you like have a leaky bucket, right? It's like you have like a bucket full of customers and they just drop out gradually, right? You kind of try to like make it smaller, the leak, so it's like less people dropping out.
So retention means that they're coming back within 1 week?
For example, this is a metric you choose,
okay,
right? So that's one of the things. Like these are basically the big areas of focus you kind of have, right? So this is why this model is interesting, is because it kind of like this really helps you say these are the 5 big things where I can improve my product, right? Where I can kind of say this is where I can either improve the landing page or I can improve the features that we have. And so on. And so you lose people because you don't have the right features, or you lose people because people don't see the features. And that's the whole point here. It's like you try to do basically optimize these. And so, how many of you read the Lean Startup actually, the book? Okay, so in the Lean Startup, Eric Ries has this concept of the build, measure, learn loop, right? And the build, measure, learn loop is basically, the idea is, what's the basic thing that a company is doing, right? And so let's say you have a software development team. A software development team, the basic thing they're doing is build it, right? So they have like a 2-week sprint, they build something, sprint is finished, they do a retrospective, say did we finish all the work, did we not, what do we need to do next 2 weeks, right? So the development team usually has build, and review. Build, review, build, review.
Sorry, what is the title of the book?
The Lean Startup.
The Lean Startup?
The Lean Startup.
The Lean Startup.
We have it very in.
But running lean might, like, you can also look at running lean.
Okay, thanks.
But so the idea behind this loop is basically, instead of saying just build, right, the usual, what a company is doing is actually, a company builds something, a product, right? And that product you would launch to a customer, you would show to a customer, and then you could measure their response, either in person, you usability tests, or usually with data, so you kind of know, okay, we sold this many copies, or that many people upgraded. From that you get the data, and from that data you learn, and that learning basically influences your next step to get. It's just like saying this is the basic like thing that you're doing in a company each week, each month, kind of optimizing your way towards making more money. And so Eric Ries has this idea of an experiment. It's just a terminology for one iteration for this loop, right? So you have a certain idea, you build the idea into a product, that product or a feature. That feature is shown to customers, you measure the response, and then you learn from that response. And that idea is an experiment. So kind of go a bit into detail like how you run these experiments, because these experiments are basically, they help you optimize the product, right? So if we look at this one here, what we want to do is say, okay, let's do an experiment on the acquisition, right? So we have a landing page, let's do something which optimizes our landing page. Let's build something for a landing page, let's measure if it gets us from 5% to 10%, right? And we can say, no, it did, or yes, it did, or maybe it got from 5 to 8. Can we do another one from 8 to 10, or is this not possible? Do we need to change another number? Okay, does this make sense on a basic level? Any questions to that basic concept? Do you want to?
No, I have no question now.
Okay. Cool. So this is a bit technical, but might still be relevant, at least for the people who have apps, for example. What we usually do is we do deploy every commit, so we don't actually like do a big release where we deploy everything, but we actually say each change that we make to the product we push to the like production version, right? So we technically we have it in the product all the time. But what we do is something called basically like feature rollouts or like selective feature rollouts. So we basically have, and Flickr for example has this as well, is instead of showing a feature all the time, you have flag, and you can say show this feature to users or don't show it to users, right? And so you can kind of decouple the technology from the part where you make the feature launch. This is an important idea. It's just you don't want to have like a big release of software, but you rather want to continuously improve your software, and then at some point flip a switch and say, okay, now we show it to them. And this would be the part here, right? So you would continuously build your new feature until it's ready, and then you say, okay, now we launch it. You show it to customers. Now we measure it.
But if you go, please go on.
No, you can go first.
Okay. So if you constantly deploying your commits, can't you build up an image that this product is under development, so it's not stable enough?
Well, it's a fair question and a fair, like, it's a risk, right?
So when I would do that, I would question myself, do I really want to do that, or do I kind of commit maybe twice a quarter, something like this?
Yes. So there's the whole idea of continuous deployment, right? So this kind of goes into continuous deployment. So continuous deployment is the idea that every change we make to our software gets deployed to production. Right? So there's no, like there might be some QA, but ideally it's automated, right? So it's like the unit tests run and then it's pushed to production. And that's it. And so there is actually a case to be made why that is better than making a manual review, because you can't actually review every little detail. You just get all these changes like queued up, and the huge amount of risk when you launch, right? And so the idea here is you gradually push, and of course you have checks in place, right? But for example, you have something that says, this is our, like, for example, each day we make $100 revenue, right? If we don't make $100 of revenue, something's wrong. So we made a change which is not good. But it's a bit different kind of thinking, basically.
Okay.
So does it make sense? Kind of. I mean, there's lots of details to
it makes sense, though it doesn't really answer my concern.
Yeah,
and my
sure.
concern was that if I do this continuous deployment, can't I build up an image of my product that, well, this product is still under development, they're not having
why would that image be, like why do people see that?
I don't know.
Like why would I think your product is still under development? Like,
because I'm deploying too often these commits. So
but do customers see that?
I don't know, they don't?
Usually they don't. I mean, if it's a mobile app, then it's different. So it depends. Like
okay,
if you have a mobile app, then it's a bit different.
That can be a story that we misunderstood the background. So I thought that we have a new revision, which is actually visible for the users.
Yeah.
But actually now you're running a new background, whatever.
Yes, exactly. So basically, yeah. So the argument here is not every change that you make needs to be shown to customers, right? So and this is actually the important point, right? It's like the important point is when you show something to customers, then you get data, right? Because you see whether people use it or not. So that you want to make explicit. You want to think about that moment, but you don't want to think about the moment where you make a change necessarily. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I would like to know something more specific. Like, can you give us a specific example of the product that you launched and you asked people and then you changed it?
You mean in regard, I guess in regard more to this, right?
Like what did you change or what they didn't like, what they
Sure.
liked, what did you learn?
Let me think. So, I mean, we did do a lot of landing page tests, so like that's one of the things that you always, like that's fairly easy to do. So for example, one change that we made a couple of months back, let's take an example. Okay, so we have leancanvas.com, right? Leancanvas.com is like this business modeling tool. So you go online, you fill out this canvas, right? And so you, the idea basically is we have like a subscription model. So if you want to share this canvas with people online, then you pay us, right? And so our activation rate is about 20%, right? So like each day we have about 100 people sign up for the site, which is good, right? Like 100 people sign up is quite nice. But of these 100 people, only 20 people actually successfully fill out the canvas online. And so we tried multiple things. For example, one thing we tried was instead of, so the question is, so you go to the site, right, and the canvas is described, and you click sign up, what happens next, right? So like, do you for example, the initial thing we had is like you go there and then you see an empty list, right? You see you need to click create canvas, and then you get the canvas, and then you fill out the canvas. And that's kind of huge round basically. Versus saying you go in and that page doesn't exist, right? So you just see directly the first canvas, right? So we just create a canvas for you. And so, for example, we did an experiment, like an A/B test, where we basically, instead of showing you the canvas directly, we would basically say, here's a video course for you, right? So we'd say, do you want to join like a free video course where we help you use the canvas, right? And so this video course would be only shown to 50% of people, and we would measure, does this actually help people convert better? And the interesting thing here was that it did help people like activate better, but what it did even more is like people stayed longer. So they got like these emails which would describe like how the product works, right? And we from that we saw that we basically like tested this, and we said if it doesn't improve, then we don't want to do it because these emails are effort, right? So we send them an email like 3 days after signed up, 7 days after signed up, like all automated. And this was, of course, effort for us, but our theory was that if you give them more content, then they understand the tool better, basically, then they have an easier time filling it out. And that worked actually well. And so we then basically, when we ran this like as an experiment for like 1 or 2 months, where we were basically measuring the data and seeing whether it improved, so we're just comparing these two groups, and then saying, okay, now this is actually working. Does it kind of make sense? I mean, it's optimization, right? So this is all about, you already know customer, you already have people coming to your site, but you want to optimize, do they understand the product?
Are you doing similar thing when you have like a new feature? You would say like you do an A/B testing where you would show this new feature for like, let's say 20%.
It really depends. I think if you do it in the activation flow, so if you do it like in this first part, like in the first, for example, 1 hour, right? It's like the first hour that people spend on your site is really important because most people will drop out after 2 minutes, and so that's where you have a clear target. Where it's like if you, because A/B test only makes sense if you have targets, right? If A/B test makes sense if
which is easy to measure, like how many people
exactly. And so we would usually do A/B tests on stuff like, so people signed up but they did not activate. Okay, and so for example, one customer of us had, so they do like this this service where you create like family moments, right? So you'd have like, you basically create like your family history, and you would say like, this person was born then, and this was like, I don't know, this great vacation and whatnot. And their biggest challenge was people not creating the first 3 moments basically, and then sharing it with their friends, right? Because the moment where they shared with their friends, they had an incentive to create more. And so for them, they did an A/B test. I mean, they didn't necessarily have to do an A/B test. It's kind of obvious that it helps to do something there. But they still did an A/B test, just saying, okay, if we basically do like a wizard, so you have like a small, like friendly person, like animal that helps you like create those moments, and then does that increase sort of the activation rate, basically. So that's how we say it. Like usually, if you have it in this like first like hour of the customer going to your site, then you want to do like maybe A/B tests. If you have it like later on, where it's about, are they coming back to your site, or why are they using it, then it's difficult to do. There's lots more in there. Okay. So the big point here is, and this is the really important change from if you look at like traditional product development, right? So if you build your product, usually you have requirements, right? So you have, a requirement would be, people need to be able to write a blog post, right? Or like a user goes to the site and needs to do this and this. Versus the hypothesis is, people are going to do this. So like an hypothesis is basically, let's actually go for this. So let's imagine we are a chat application, right? Or maybe we are like Facebook, like social network, and right now we have like 2D avatars, right? Like just images of people, and we want to do like a fancy new 3D avatar thing where they can like create, like on the Wii maybe, you can just like create a nice, funny avatar. And so the requirement is, users can create 3D avatars, right? So like the development team sits down and does the functionality, and they're done when users can create 3D avatars, right? And so it's basically about changing that definition of done from this requirement to saying, we believe that users will create 3D avatar and spend more time on our profiles, right? So we kind of say, what's the reason why we're building a feature? Instead of saying, we need this feature, we say, we think we need this feature because, even more so, we actually make it falsifiable, saying, we think if we make this feature, then 50% of users will do this, and the average time spent on profiles will go up from this to this, right? So it's very concrete, saying, what's our expectation of this change that we're making, basically? And the whole point here is you really know what you're improving or not, right? Because the big issue is if your whole product management and like planning is dependent on requirements, where like we need this, we need this, we need this, right? Like we built this new feature, this new feature, this new feature, then you never know whether it helped you or not. You never know whether you actually improve or whether you just added on top of it. And so that's one really important concept. Does it make sense to everybody? And so, of course, testing your value first, right? So that means it's not important necessarily to get 10,000 of customers to your site. It's more important to get 100 customers into 5 paying customers. Like it's much more important to get the product working necessarily than to make the perfect PR campaign. So quickly on something called experiment reports, and this is the last thing. So and hopefully your minds still have some capacity. So experiment reports are basically how we document this, right? It's like how we as a team work together to implement this idea of build, measure, learn, and this idea of what do we do next, which is the next feature we build. And so basically an experiment, how do you plan an experiment, right? So how do you plan such a change you're trying to make? You're basically saying, why are you doing it, right? So you're basically documenting the context of something. You're then saying, what is the goal, right? So like, as I said, like this, what's this hypothesis, what's this goal we're thinking we're going to achieve with this, and you want to quantify it. So you really want to say, we're going to increase the rate from this to this. Because then you can say whether you did the right thing versus later on. So basically, if you don't do it, like if you don't put a number to it, then later on you just say, oh, this was a number, of course, right? So I kind of say, of course, it improved something, right? And so the point here is you want to set the expectation before you do the work. And then you want to set scope and time blocks, which I'll detail that. So we actually do this as like a nice A4 sheet of paper. We don't have these printed out right now, but I'll just quickly go through them, and I'll try to send you these somehow. So we do these either like in Keynote or actually as physical papers. And so we basically have like this report kind of defines the experiment, on like on the left side defines the experiment, basically says what do we want to do. And on the right side, which we have here, on the right side we basically document the results, right? So we kind of say, okay, what we did in the past. This is actually quite interesting if you can show, like for example, a new engineer or a new person joining the company, you can show them what did we try with the product in the past, right? So in the past we ran these marketing campaigns, in the past we built this feature, it didn't help at all, in the past we tried this email marketing, and so on, right? So it's like just showing the results of failed experiments, basically. So the idea here is you kind of start with saying, and this is like, again, it's like saying we want to build a new feature, instead we want to run an experiment, right? So instead of saying we want to build new stuff, we really say we want to run experiments and improve our product. And we start with just documenting the context, right? So this would be, like, let's take this like idea of the optimizing the activation form from Canvas. It would be, okay, right now we think people are confused when they sign up to the product from canvas.com. It's difficult to use. We think we can do this better with a video tutorial, for example. Then false hypotheses would be a list of like statements saying we think right now like the activation rate is going to go up from 20% to 25% within a month, right? And we can measure that again. Question? No. Okay. And again, we write this down, right? So we kind of write down the background and we write down what we think is going to happen. And then we say how long we're going to try to do this, right? So this is pretty important. So in the past, what I've done in, for example, this like my second company where we tried this cloud computing company, we basically did the same thing for 1.5 years. So we basically tried the same strategy over and over again. We did never really change our strategy, right? And so the point here is you want to put a time limit on your strategy. You want to say, for the next month, I will try this. And then after this month, I have a sheet of paper which says, I wanted to try this, but it didn't work. And you can actually sit down and say, okay, why did it not work? Do I want to try it again? Or maybe I should try something really different. And so the point here would be you'd say, okay, experiment scope is like a month, for example, or 3 to 4 weeks usually. So kind of giving you a time frame where you say, I want to make a change, I want to build a new feature, I want to show it to customers within this time frame. And if I did not make a successful change, if it did not actually improve my product, then I should remove that change again. Or maybe keep it, but not necessarily think that that's the right way to go. And then minimum build is just like, what do you need to build, right? So like, what's the build step for this feature, for this experiment? Does this make sense? Okay. And on the right side, we usually document then continuously like what are the results, right? So like what are the actual data we measured each week after we launched like this feature? Okay, activation rate went up from 20 to 22, went down again to 19, went down, like kind of just showing data. And then in the end, basically saying, okay, so what's our learning, right? It's like, okay, this experiment has now ended. It was either successful or we ran out of time, or we just didn't want to do it anymore. So what did we learn from it, and was it validated? Meaning we made a successful change to our product. Was it invalidated? Meaning we definitely made the wrong change to our product. Or was it inconclusive? Meaning we kind of made a change, but it didn't really help. And so if it's invalidated, you usually wouldn't want to do more of the same stuff. If it's inconclusive, you can say, okay, maybe we change it, right? Maybe it was the wrong strategy. And then it's really about what's the next action, right? So it's kind of writing, really stating, okay, so based on this thing we tried to do, what's the logical next step? And so failure, of course, is good, right? So the whole point here is if this fails, this still tells us something, right? This still tells us something. We tried a certain strategy, it did not work. We can put this in like a binder or like a keynote file or something and look it up again. And then what we usually do is we put this on a Kanban board, right? So how many of you know like Kanban as a concept? Okay, so the idea behind Kanban is basically you document what you're working on right now, right? So the idea here is you usually just like draw this on a sheet of paper, for example. It's like you have different stages, right? So like the usual Kanban board is to do, like what stuff I need to do, stuff that I'm working on, and stuff that I've done, right? So like basically, and you would have like post-its, so you'd like move the post-its from to do, in progress, and then done. And you kind of always see what's in progress right now. Like what are we working on right now? What did we already successfully do, and what do we still need? So the idea here is with Kanban board for like Lean Startup or experiments, you actually want to say what's been built right now, so what are we building right now, what are we measuring right now, and what are we trying to learn from right now. So in big, this looks kind of like this. We have this like physically, we actually have this physically in Texas in our office, but I also like we have digital version as well. But it's really simple actually, and kind of helps. And each of these is basically these experiment reports, right? So each of these is like the experiment we're currently running, and then of course we do have a separate task board where it's actually the tasks we need to do for these experiments. So like the experiments is basically our big vision or strategy, like it's strategy, like it's our big strategy we're working on. And then we have like a separate board for tracking details. And we try to aim for one experiment per team member. Also a big difference, right? So like the whole point is not the company does an experiment, but each team member can try their own experiment and then show the company the progress on that. Okay, does this kind of make sense? I have like really like it's almost everything, but just like is there any more questions like how that works or why we're doing this?
So so you're saying that with a team of 3 people, you wouldn't do more than 3 experiments at once, running parallelly, or?
I mean, it depends. So if they're all in measure, then I might, right? So like the point is if I have an A/B test running, and that A/B test is running and I can't do anything anyway, then I might just start another one. But the point, I mean, we've started actually trying to do 2 experiments per team member, like as a count, so like that also still works, but it's like realistically right now it's 1 experiment per team member. So it's, but the whole point here is it's actually fine to do more. The issue is doing less, right? Like if you have 1 big experiment running, it's like we do a big feature release, 6-month experiment, right? Like that's bad. Like you want to do 1 month or even less, like lots of experiments. Any other questions?
So how many people do actually use it? Because I saw a lot of people in Australia that were trying to apply this Lean method, and it takes a lot of diligence and discipline to stick to the board, and we have.
But it's the same thing. So if you could ask the same thing with Scrum, for example. Right? Scrum and Agile, it's like the same issue. But the point is, and this is why I also try to simplify it down a bit. Like this, there's a longer version of why this is like this, and there's like the strategy and risk board, and Lean Canvas has 9 fields, not 4, right? So it's like there's lots of more details. But I think these are all justifiable why they are important, right? So the point here is, it kind of like how many people are doing it. I don't have a number, but I know that people are doing it like that we're working with. It's always a question how they simplify it down for them, right? Like what's their minimum version, right? And my minimum version that I personally use, and we also use in the company, is just having this simple build, measure, learn, and the experiment reports. which are a bit of work, to be honest, right? Like this, like filling out this kind of thing, is actually work, right? Like this actually takes time. But the good thing is we then know what we did, right? So it's like the value definitely outweighs the cost. And for example, Toyota did the same thing with like issues. So like in the Toyota production system, if you have like the infamous TPS reports. But there is some point to this idea of a fault happens and you document why it happened, right? It's like this idea of if you actually have like the assembly line and the assembly line got stuck for some reason, right? And you need to like do a 5 whys and figure out what's the reason for that, and like actually writing that down so that other people can learn from it. And that's the same idea here. It's like instead of trying the same thing, you basically want to write down what you did and what you're gonna do. But I mean, it's not perfect. It's just like what we have right now. What works for us best.
And those experiments, how long do they usually How long does it usually take to build one and then to measure one?
Sure. Let me still have here. Time boxing. So you have this, and usually we put the experiment scope for the build and the measure stage. So learn is really dependent on your company, right? Like depending on how long you want to look at a certain experiment, then maybe you need to have like a big meeting and discuss why this did not work, because your whole strategy and all investors were built on that. But the experiment scope, like this idea of defining it in experiments, usually for the build and measure stage together. So we don't separate them, but you could also try to separate them. It's like kind of saying 3 weeks per build and a month per measure or something. And the whole point is, of course, you don't starve, you drown, right? You have too many things to do. So the reason why you do time boxes because you don't want to do open-ended learning, right? So if you do 10 experiments at the same time and you're just learning, but you're not really making progress. It's like the whole point where you want to do this, for example. So in the beginning, you could also time box the interviews, right? So you could also say, if I want to do customer interviews, I want to do it in 2 weeks, right? In 2 weeks, I want to sit down with 10 customers and get their input, understand what's happening, sit down with the team, discuss next steps, right? Instead of doing it over months, which I've personally done and which doesn't work, right? Like if you take months for customer interviews, then it doesn't work. And if you do something qualitative, where it's like you launch something, but then it's more about individual customers, so it's not an A/B test, but it's something where you really see the difference quickly, basically, right? Whereas like an MVP, for example, then you can usually do a month. And then if you do something quantitative, where it's like an A/B test that you're running, it depends on the traffic, but usually 2 to 3 months. Because you just need the time, right? So it's like the issue is if you really want to reach this statistical significance, then you need time.
Why are you saying that interviewing for a month doesn't work?
Because I have seen myself that doesn't work. No, the issue is that if you don't do enough of them, you don't see a pattern, right? So imagine what I mean with doing interviews for a month is you do 2 interviews a week, and the difference is you do 10 interviews a week. And this 5.
Okay, so actually it's not the time shift which matters, but the quantity of the interviews.
Yes, it's the density basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not about exactly. Like if you do 3 interviews in 2 weeks, it's still not good, right? It's more about if you're trying to target these like 20 interviews or so, in which time frame do you do these 20 interviews? If you do this in 2 weeks, then you would have 10 a week, and that would be good. Just because it's just a practical thing, because you then see a pattern.
Okay, we just misunderstood each other, right?
Of course, no, makes sense. Yeah. No, but it's like that for me was a really important change. Like a friend of mine told me that was something that he did, like this 10x, like order of magnitude difference in density of the interviews, and that makes all the difference for making it work or not work. Cool. So the last thing, and then we're done. We have Q&A if you have any more questions. What we also do is where we put all of this is like in a weekly strategy meeting, right? So we just sit down each week and review experiments in a weekly meeting, and basically focus on getting things done in the daily stand-up. So if you do like a daily stand-up meeting where you discuss like what's happening right now, what's the next step, usually we try to not discuss like the big ideas and like what could we do next, because that's bad because you get distracted. So we try to always do this in weekly meetings only. And in the daily is all about getting done, right? So like this week we want to get this done, get it done, get it done, get it done. And each Monday we have 2 hours where we'll discuss in like which experiments are we running and why. And so you want to avoid brainstorming, right? This is maybe a bit controversial, but the whole point is if you sit down for a meeting, you're not sitting down because you want to brainstorm together. You're sitting down because you want to share the ideas you already have and maybe discuss them, but you're not going to come up with new ideas, right? Because like the issue is if you have a group, and I am a loud person because I have an idea, then you're going to listen to me, right? But you might have a different idea. But the issue is if you don't, like in a meeting where you're trying to brainstorm, there's always one person which just always says the first idea, and then everybody converges around that idea. So that's why you do an experiment where you write down the experiment, and then you discuss it. So everybody writes down their idea, and then you can discuss it. It's something called design studio technique, which we kind of adopted, where we would basically observe and explain, kind of saying, we see this activation rate being low, right? So we kind of want, I've seen something being bad, I want to do something about it. Then everybody in the group tries to think of their approach, their solution to the problem, and then we discuss each of these solutions in the group. But it's always about you brainstorm alone, and then in the group you discuss the result of your brainstorming. You don't try to do a brainstorming meeting. Or at least for us, it's really bad. Or really good not doing brainstorming meetings. And then we just review these results and kind of try to kill experiments or restart. And that's really it. If there's anything else you want to talk about, I'd be happy to. I hope it was kind of useful. It was basically trying to put together a couple of talks, making sure that it's not too much content, which I think it was. But if you have any questions, let me know. Or email me.
I just want to know, what are the names of your startups?
Sure. Let me go back to the first slide. So, can you see those? Okay. So, Soup.io was the first one I did. It was 4 people. So,
okay.
This one here. Yep. Big red button. And then we did Efficient Cloud, which was technically 5 different things. So we tried Efficient Cloud, hosting static platform directory as a Ruby IO, Rails hosting, and Solid Rails. And then the other ones were different projects that I did. And then the most recent one is Spark 59. But so just explain, do you want to explain what these were?
I just think that you actually did tools which help other people doing this lean.
Well, yeah, kind of. But it's a bit. So what I actually do mostly is user cycle, right? So I actually mostly do this tool here, which technically is a metrics tool. So it's not even though it has some lean startup aspects in it, it's more a standalone product. But we do use a lot of lean startup as content. So if we do content marketing, for example, we do a lot of stuff around lean startup because we have the background there.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's like for me personally, it's much more interesting to build a product that works than build workshops, for example. Right? It's even though you can make money with workshops, it's not as interesting. So, but yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because it's so different, right? The first company was consumer focused, the second company was enterprise focused, and this company now is kind of SMB focused, I would say, because most of our customers are anything between 20 and 100 people or so. But it's I kind of see the ideal niche there right now. It's this SaaS type businesses, SMBs. It seems easiest to market to.